Visit rccmediacenter.com.
We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
Not only will this tax plan pay for itself, but it will pay down debt.
There are moral and legal obligation questions that I think we'll have to wrestle with as a society.
When we as people go wobbly on the truth, we go wobbly on America.
All you have to do is look at the numbers, look at what we've done.
And this is all in the beginning.
From 100.9 FM WXIR, this is Evidence of Design, and I'm your host, Jason Taylor. Evidence of Design is a live talk show about the political economy. We critique income and wealth inequality and support democratic values. Thank you for listening, and welcome. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. You're listening to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. My name is Jason Taylor, joined by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
Good morning.
On today's show, we are talking all things impeachment. Matt, this week and last week, the U.S. House of Representatives were holding their public hearings on impeachment, and this is quite historic. So we are devoting basically the entirety of this hour today on impeachment. We're going to be summarizing what's been going on over the entire 2 weeks and more of the impeachment inquiry, why it matters, and we're also going to be hearing kind of firsthand, listening to Adam Schiff. He is the top member on the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. We're going to be hearing from Adam Schiff and his closing statements and hearing direct words from him. So for those who are new to Evidence of Design, we mainly critique income and wealth inequality on the show. We also support democratic values and social justice. We love to have you participate throughout the show because this is live radio. It's Saturday, November 23rd, and whether you're tuned in on 100.9 or on the TuneIn app or online at www.1009WXIR, we appreciate you being here. You can participate in a few different ways. One is by calling into the studio at 585-219-8889. Again, that's 219-8889. You can also email us, radioeod@gmail.com, and we're on Facebook and Twitter at Radio EOD. That stands for Evidence of Design. So again, we're talking all things impeachment this hour. Matt, we ready to take it away?
We're ready.
Let's do it.
Don't Let Go by Pink Industry.
And this is Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. Matt, over the past 2 weeks, the House of Representatives has been holding public hearings in an impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump. And as we mentioned, these hearings are historic. They've only happened 3 other times in U.S. history, once into President Andrew Johnson in the 1860s, once into President Richard Nixon in the 1970s, and then once into President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Now we have an impeachment inquiry into President Trump. So this is very important, and for the past 2 weeks, the House of Representatives has been holding public hearings, and it's sort of taken over the airwaves. And there was also a Democratic debate this week, Matt, that didn't really have time to get into because there's so much else going on. A lot of things to stay up to date with.
Yes.
And so we will be devoting this entire hour to talking about impeachment. It is very important. So the current impeachment inquiry stems from a July 25th phone call President Trump had with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In the call, President Trump asked President Zelensky to, quote, do us a favor. After months of investigation, document analysis, and testimony with both career government officials and Trump appointees, it's now known that Trump's ask for Ukraine to do us a favor was meant as Trump would withhold $394 million of congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine, who is now, Ukraine's undergoing a defensive war against Russia. So Trump would withhold that $394 million of aid until Ukrainian President Zelensky publicly announced a corruption investigation into Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and to have Zelensky open the door on conspiracy theories that a Ukrainian company worked with the Democratic National Committee during the 2016 election to undermine Trump. It's been said, I think rather eloquently, that in short, Trump's plan was to withhold missiles in exchange for Ukrainian misinformation. Missiles in exchange for misinformation. So at the end of September, after Trump's July 25th phone call became public, Nancy Pelosi, who is the Democratic Majority Leader in the House of Representatives, finally came out and announced a formal impeachment inquiry against President Trump on the grounds that Trump was using the powers of his office to undermine U.S. national security in return for personal political gain. And that's where we're at now. The question is, did Donald Trump use his office and undermine national security to benefit himself at the expense of anyone else and doing his duties? So, the House has, there's various committees in the House of Representatives, and they've all been sort of looking into Trump's dealings for a while, and the House Intelligence Committee has been at the forefront of this over the entirety of the Trump presidency. Before the 2018 midterm elections, which were pivotal and historic because that gave Democrats the control of the House and provided a check on Trump's power. Before that, even the House Intel Committee was at the forefront. You had Devin Nunes, who then was the chair of the House Intel Committee, and you had Adam Schiff, who then was the minority leader, the ranking member. Both of those members are still leading the Intel Committee, although the roles are flipped now because Democrats control the House. So Adam Schiff is the chair and Devin Nunes is the ranking member. Again, Schiff Democrat, Nunes Republican.
Right.
And their work in the past was on the Bob Mueller investigation and whether or not there was Russian interference in the election and whether or not Trump obstructed justice. And of course, it was found by Bob Mueller that yes, unequivocally so, Russia interfered in the U.S. election in 2016 to sway voters' minds to support Donald Trump and not Hillary Clinton. And also, it was found that Bob Mueller, the special counsel, basically said, we cannot really formally condemn, but we cannot really formally acquit Donald Trump of whether or not he obstructed justice into this investigation. And Mueller's main reason for that was a long-standing not necessarily that long-standing, but a Justice Department sort of rule that you cannot indict a sitting president through the Justice Department. So the Intel Committee was working on that for a long time. Nunes, of course, is a very staunch Trump ally. He has had many private meetings with Trump at very questionable times right before he releases major public documents and statements. And he's clearly in cahoots with Trump in that, not just a member of the same party, but they're very close friends and political operatives. And Devin Nunes' judgment is severely compromised. He simply can't be trusted, to say it plainly, to make an objective or impartial statement about Donald Trump. He's clearly working for him in a number of regards. I'm not necessarily just talking about for money. Devin Nunes cannot be trusted to be objective about this whole affair. And so now we're into the impeachment inquiry, and Matt, there have been a number of officials who've testified. Let's hear about those officials. So Wednesday of last week, Wednesday, November 13th, Bill Taylor, he's the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. He's the top U.S. diplomat to Ukraine.
Yes. And
also George Kent. He's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. They both testified. On Friday, Marie Yovanovitch. I always want to say Yanukovych, but that's very different. Viktor Yanukovych. So Marie Yovanovitch testified. She's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. So she was forced out by the Trump administration and Rudy Giuliani early on this year, before any of this even happened, before the July 25th phone call. Marie Yovanovitch, the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, she's former because she was forced out by Trump and his allies because she did not want to have Ukrainian-U.S. relations be undermined for Trump's personal political gain. And so that's why Bill Taylor now, has replaced Marie Yovanovitch. On Tuesday of this week, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified. He's the Director of European Affairs on the National Security Council. Jennifer Williams also testified. She is the Special Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence on European and Russian affairs. Later on that same day, this Tuesday, Kurt Volker, the former U.S. Special Envoy Ukraine, testified. Also Timothy Morrison, the top advisor on Russia and Europe on the National Security Council, testified. On Wednesday of this week, perhaps the most high-profile testimony came from Gordon Sondland. He's the U.S. ambassador to the European Union. He's also, a Trump friend. He has Trump's personal cell phone number. He's called him numerous times.
Trump donor.
Yep, he's a Trump donor. Of course, Trump has now completely distanced himself from Gordon Sondland. He says, I didn't really know him that much. Didn't really know him that well.
He donated over $1 million to his inauguration.
Yep.
Which directly led to him receiving the position that he has.
Exactly, the ambassadorship. And so, of course, Gordon Sondland donates a lot of money because he's a wealthy guy. And then Trump, tit for tat, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. He appoints Gordon Sondland as the ambassador to the European Union. But when Ambassador Sondland testified, he kind of he came out and said, look, everyone at the highest levels in the Trump administration knew about Trump, his quid pro quo, saying, I'm going to withhold this money to you, Ukraine, unless you come out and announce a public investigation into my domestic political arrival. So he's perhaps the most highest profiled testimony. But later on this Wednesday, you also heard from Laura Cooper. She's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukrainian Affairs, and Eurasian Affairs, and David Hale. He's the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. And this Thursday, the last public hearings, we heard from Fiona Hill. She's the former top advisor on Russia and Europe on the National Security Council. And lastly, we heard from David Holmes, the Counselor for Political Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, Ukraine. So there's
12 witnesses in all.
Yes, thank you. There's 12 witnesses. They are both career government officials. Perhaps the right wing would want to characterize them as the deep state. I don't agree with that characterization. I would say that they're people who've made a living out of working in the federal government to support this country. And so you heard from both career government officials who've served under both Democratic and Republican presidents, sometimes for decades. And also you heard from Trump appointees like Timothy Morrison, like Gordon Sondland. These people are not career government officials. They are Trump appointees. So you're hearing from both sides, and essentially all of these 12 witnesses, Matt, corroborated the accusations of Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, and those sort of the Democratic narrative that
of the whistleblower.
Of the whistleblower, right. Of the whistleblower who kind of made this phone call aware to the Democrats. All of these 12 people who testified basically came out and said, yes, there was a quid pro quo, meaning Trump would not, and the Ukrainians knew this because Trump told them this, and his policy, the Ukrainians would not be allowed to receive U.S. military assistance that had already been formally authorized and mandated to be spent by Congress for Ukraine to defend themselves against a war with Russia that Russia still denies. This aid would be withheld to Ukraine unless they came out with a public investigation into Joe Biden's son and also supported misinformation about conspiracy theories, all for the benefit of Donald Trump personally in the upcoming 2020 election.
It's like crime bingo. How many laws can you break in one action?
Yeah, and so, what laws could Trump be breaking? Well, again, we said that the Justice Department has sort of an understanding that you can't indict a former president. Well, impeachment is not the Justice Department. It's separate. It's in the Constitution. It grants the legislative branch the supreme power to check the executive branch by removing the president if he or she is not doing their job and undermining the country. So it could be high crimes and misdemeanors, or it could be bribery, or it could be treason, or it could be a number of other things. And so far it seems to be bribery or high crimes and misdemeanors that he may be charged with. And so that sets the context of where we are at now, hopefully as an update to everyone. There were thousands of pages of testimony. There were tens of hours of hearings, and I understand that is a lot to wade through as like just someone trying to do your life in Rochester, New York, or wherever you're listening from. That's a lot of information. Unfortunately, we talked about in the past, living in a democracy requires people to do homework. It requires people to somehow take time out of their busy lives to come to terms and think rationally and critically about what's happening. It's not easy, especially as there's so many different media outlets, including, evidence of design, in your Facebook and your Twitter and all the rest of it that really vie for your attention. And we're also busy and stressed because the economy doesn't work for us. So it really requires us to do our homework. And hopefully in this show, we'll be providing that context, and we'll be playing clips from Adam Schiff very soon just to hear directly from him to give an overview of what is going on. So I should remind you again, listeners, that's kind of what we're here for today on 100.9 FM WXIR. We do want to hear from you throughout the hour about this impeachment inquiry that's going on right now. We'd love to hear from you, 585-219-8889. Again, that's 585-219-8889. We're also email us radioeod@gmail.com. But again, 585-219-8889. So, Matt, I pulled lengthy audio clips from Adam Schiff this week.
Yes.
And I would like for us to listen to them. So these will be very lengthy clips, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes of Adam Schiff's closing testimonies. Or closing statements. So each day there was a testimony with any one of those aforementioned 12 people who testified to the House. The structure of the hearings were that Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes were allowed to give closing statements to summarize their parties' sort of positions on what was going on. If you want a laugh or a cry, you can listen to Devin Nunes and hear all of the things that he has to say that are very questionable and seem to be not based in reality at all. So we'll be hearing from Adam Schiff. Again, he's the chair of the House Intel Committee. And so, Matt, let's do that right now. Let's hear Adam Schiff's closing statement. This is about 5 minutes long from the testimony of this Tuesday of this week when Kurt Volker and Tim Morrison were finished testifying. Here is a lengthy clip of Adam Schiff and his closing statement from that day.
Now, you've been asked to opine on the meaning of the term bribery. Although you weren't asked to opine on the meaning of the terms high crimes and misdemeanors. But bribery, for those watching at home, is the conditioning of official acts in exchange for something of personal value. The official acts we're talking about here are a White House meeting that President Zelensky desperately sought, and as you have acknowledged, Ambassador Volker, was deeply important to this country at war with Russia, to show the United States had this new president's back. That meeting was important. That meeting is an official act. The military assistance is even more significant because Ukrainians are dying every day in their war with Russia. And so the withholding of military assistance to get these investigations, which you now have acknowledged, Ambassador Volker, was wrong for the president to request. The idea of withholding that military aid to get these political investigations should be anathema, repugnant to every American, because it means the sacrifice not just of Ukrainian national security, but American national security for the interest of the president personally and politically. Now, my Republican colleagues, all they seem to be upset about with this is not that the president sought an investigation of his political rival, not that he withheld a White House meeting and $400 million in aid we all pass on a bipartisan basis to pressure Ukraine to do those investigations. Their objection is he got caught. Their objection is that someone blew the whistle. And they would like this whistleblower identified. And the president wants this whistleblower punished. That's their objection. Not that the president engaged in this conduct, but that he got caught. Their defense is, well, he ended up releasing the aid. Yes, after he got caught. That doesn't make this any less odious. Now, Americans may be watching this and asking, why should the United States care about Ukraine? Why should we care about Ukraine? And this was the import, I think, of the conversation, the now infamous conversation in that Kiev restaurant with Gordon Sondland holding the phone away from his head because the president was talking so loud. What does the president ask in that call the day after the now infamous call he had with Zelensky? What does he ask on that cell phone call? Not whether the Rada had passed some new anti-corruption reform. No. Are the Ukrainians going to do the investigation? Meaning into Biden. And Sondland's answer is they're going to do it. They'll do essentially anything the president wants. But what's more telling is the conversation, I think, that Sondland has with the Foreign Service Officer Holmes afterwards, in which the president says, basically, Donald Trump doesn't give an expletive about Ukraine. He cares about the big things. And Mr. Holmes says, well, Ukraine's at war with the Russians. That's kind of a big thing. And Sondland's answer is no. He cares about big things that affect his personal interests. This is why Americans should care about this. Americans should care about what happens to our allies who are dying, but Americans should care about their own national security and their own president and their own constitution. And they will need to ask themselves, as we will have to ask ourselves in Congress, are we prepared to accept that a president of the United States can leverage official acts, military assistance, White House meetings, to get an investigation of a political rival? Are we prepared to say, well, I guess that's just what we should expect of a president of the United States? I don't think we want to go there. I don't think our founding fathers would have wanted us to go there. Indeed, I think when the founding fathers provided a remedy, that remedy being impeachment, they had the very concern that a president of the United States may betray the national security interests of the country for personal interests. They put that remedy in the Constitution, not because they wanted to willy-nilly overturn elections. No, because they wanted a powerful anti-corruption mechanism when that corruption came from the highest office in the land. We are adjourned.
So that was a lengthy clip from Adam Schiff. He is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, leading the public testimonies in the House impeachment inquiry. So that was him talking this Tuesday, November 26th, after the testimony from Kurt Volker and Tim Morrison in his closing statement. Matt, Adam Schiff talked about a number of things, summarizing the import of these events and what's going on and the import of potential charges against Trump. What struck you there, if anything?
When he called out Republicans for complaining that it's not the president's actions that they take issue with. It's that he was caught, which is what Adam Schiff said over and over again.
Yeah.
He was caught.
Mm-hmm.
He was caught. I think that in sort of the way that a lot of the media has covered these events, the constant tunneling, or the constant focus on the idea of was there a quid pro quo, which is a phrase or a term that I think a lot of people in America are not even entirely familiar with or understand what that means, has sort of taken away or distracted from or otherwise impaired our ability to understand what it is exactly that Trump has done in this particular instance that is so reprehensible. And I think we would all benefit from just clearly outlining and defining what it is that he has done or is accused of doing, at least. In my opinion, it seems very clear and obvious that he's guilty of what he's done, of what he's been accused of. But perhaps for legal purposes, I should only say that what he is allegedly accused of. And that is that, firstly, Trump withheld aid, almost $400 million in armaments and other sort of help to the Ukrainians that had already been approved by Congress. So just in those few words alone, Trump overextended his authority as the head of the executive branch to go around Congress, which is something he's done before many times. I think back often, like Jason, you're very fond of remembering when Mitch McConnell refused to hold hearings on Merrick Garland. I think my sort of version of that is remembering when Trump shut down the entire government to get funding for his border wall.
Yeah.
This is just something that is every day for Trump. He doesn't respect the sort of the idea of checks and balances, the idea that there are three branches of government in order to restrict any one person from becoming too powerful. I think he's entirely disinterested in that concept, and he doesn't value or respect it at all. So he overextended, in my opinion, the authority of his office, and in so doing to bribe a foreign power to investigate a political rival. I don't know why anybody would not be concerned about having another nation investigating anybody involved in politics, or just really anyone at all in our own country. Like, that is our jurisdiction. That is sort of part of what sovereignty is about, is the ability to decide for ourselves, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really speaking as eloquently about this as I want, but those three things are incredibly harmful to the fabric of our democracy, the way in which we operate, and by engaging in them and engaging in other behaviors that threaten the sort of stability of our system of government, which is, as I think we're increasingly learning, very fragile. We just tip closer and closer to becoming or otherwise resembling the systems and structures of governments that we have long held as odious and reprehensible.
I think those are very powerful points, Matt. To add on, in a perhaps smaller example of something else that's an issue here, is potential witness tampering, because many of the people who've testified to the House after receiving, subpoenas to testify, Trump has gone on Twitter to disparage them personally and calling them out and saying, I either didn't know this person, or this person's judgment is poor, or this person's corrupt and a never Trumper, and he's doing that while people are testifying. And so that is a very big issue as well, because this is the President of the United States, who is, I think we used to say the President of the United States was the most powerful leader of the free world. I don't think that still holds true anymore. I don't think the United States is the most powerful country in the world anymore. And I don't think that the United States is leading the free world anymore. And so I can't even bestow that title on Trump, but he's still a very, 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 very powerful man who commands millions of people's hearts and minds with anything he happens to write on Twitter, or even formally through a presidential decree. And for this individual to destroy someone's life, and he's done it again and again and again, singling people out on Twitter, let's say, that's an issue too. Kings and queens in the past could just demand your execution, and while we're not there yet, it's akin to it if you can just destroy someone's career and credibility that way. And so to add on to your very import things on a much larger scale, Matt, I would sort of just contribute that on a smaller scale.
Yeah, I think I would also like, jumping off that, to bring attention to something that Fiona Hill said during her testimony, which was the focus that a lot of Republicans in the House Intelligence hearings had on encouraging this conspiracy theory that the Ukrainian, or some Ukrainian company was responsible for hacking or attempting to hack into the Republican campaigns during the 2016 presidential election. And this got a lot of attention, perhaps not as much as Gordon Sondland's testimony, but it still got a lot of attention, which I was grateful for, because she explicitly said that this is a false narrative. Mm-hmm. This is a narrative that is being perpetrated by Russian security forces.
Yep.
And I just have to imagine that, Putin is laughing through all of this because he just loves the disorder that he's been able to cause. And I don't know if Trump colluded with the Russians directly. During the 2016 presidential election, as Robert Mueller investigated all that, and I know that Trump practices plausible deniability. We've seen that just through this investigation in this current investigation, the impeachment inquiry. But I have to imagine that he's indifferent, and that he sees the office of the presidency as an opportunity for himself, and his actions just regarding the Ukrainian president alone sort of typifies how he views everything that he does for other people as a way for him to get something from them. And that's just not how the office of the presidency is supposed to operate. Not in the way that he is using it. Mm-hmm. This is not supposed to be an opportunity for an individual to enrich themselves, to benefit from the powers of the office in a personal way. And I think it is very evident and clear that is exactly how Trump views it.
You're also evidently listening to Evidence of Design. That was a great one. On 100.9 FM WXAR in Rochester. This is Evidence of Design. We're talking about impeachment today, and we'd invite you to call in 585-219-8889. The hour is racing away from us. I cannot believe we are already where we're at, because we have much more to talk about. Matt, I'd like to continue to hear from Adam Schiff, and let's hear another clip from him. This is part of Adam Schiff's closing statement this Thursday, November 28th, after Fiona Hill and David Holmes testified. Let's hear a little bit from Adam Schiff on one of the Republicans' defense of Trump and the notion of hearsay.
Let's just discuss this in terms that all people can understand. The impression they would have you take from it's all hearsay is because we in this committee were not in that wardroom with you, Dr. Hill. We were not in that meeting earlier with Dr. Bolton, that because we're not in the room, it's all hearsay. After all, you're relating what you heard and you're saying it, so it must be hearsay, and therefore we don't really have to think about it, do we? We don't have to consider that you have direct evidence that this meeting in the White House was being withheld because the president wanted these meetings, these investigations. We can't accept that. Well, if that were true, you could never present any evidence in court unless the jury was also in the wardroom. That's absurd. They don't accept the documentary evidence, all the text messages about quid pro quos, and are we really saying, and that's crazy, and if my worst nightmare is the Russians will get it and I'll quit. They don't accept the documents. The few documents that we have from the State Department that weren't produced, by the way, by the State Department, where Sondland communicates directly with the Secretary of State about this investigative interest of the president. And they don't accept the documents either. I guess the documents are also hearsay. Now, it might be a little more convincing if they were joining us in demanding that the documents be produced, but of course they're not. And we know why not. Because the documents are like that one we saw on the screen. They implicate others, including Secretary Pompeo. So, of course, Donald Trump and Secretary Pompeo don't want us to see those documents. But apparently it's all hearsay. Even when you actually hear the president, Mr. Holmes, that's hearsay. We can't rely on people saying what the president said. Apparently we can only rely on what the president says, and there we shouldn't even rely on that either. We shouldn't really rely on what the president said in the call record. We should imagine he said something else. We should imagine he said something about actually fighting corruption instead of what he actually said, which was, I want you to do us a favor, though. I want you to look into this 2016 CrowdStrike conspiracy theory, and I want you to look into the Bidens. I guess we're not even supposed to rely on that because that's hearsay. Well, that's absurd. That would be like saying you can't rely on the testimony of the burglars during Watergate because it's only hearsay. Or you can't consider the fact that they tried to break in because they got caught. They actually didn't get what they came for, so, kind of no harm, no foul. That's absurd.
Again, that was Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, part of his closing statement on Thursday, November 28th of this week, after Fiona Hill and David Holmes testified. Matt, I found that to be very powerful. It goes to me to the heart of so much of our issues nowadays in terms of truth and who we believe and our polarization and our partisanship. And I think Schiff debunks a lot of the sort of willy-nilly, can't quite prove it, plausible deniability argument of the Republicans by saying, you gotta think and use your brain and listen to evidence and reason and judgment and critical thinking skills to come up with, how the world works. And just because, let's say, the aid was actually released to Ukraine after a while, just because the aid got released, by the way, it only got released after the Trump administration was caught withholding it. They wouldn't have released the aid, it seems, if they were never caught and the whistleblower didn't come forward.
Or even if they would have, it still would have been a problem.
Yeah, it still would have been a problem because it's the intent and what you were trying to do. And so I found that to be a very powerful clip.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying earlier, that the Republicans and Trump especially have done nothing but try to discredit the witnesses that have been called during these last 2 weeks, and it's deplorable because I'm using that word, but it is because the objective, especially of people like Devin Nunes and the other Republicans serving on that committee, is to find the truth. They should not be beholden to protecting Trump. They should not be beholden to protecting the power of the party that they serve. They should be trying to serve and protect the people. That's what they were elected for. And by enabling and encouraging this kind of behavior, they are actively harming not just the sort of values that we aspire to. They are endangering us on a national level because they are furthering, whether purposefully or indirectly, a Russian narrative, one of our most dangerous adversaries. Thank you. In the world, that is currently led by a man who engages in a kleptocratic form of government, something that I'm sure contributes to Trump's everlasting admiration of him. And we should not take that sitting down. We should not be. We should all be in the streets rioting at this point, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. This is unacceptable. As Adam Schiff said in much restrained terms, I think this is absurd. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely absurd.
Let's hear the last clip we have from Adam Schiff. This is that same day, Thursday, November 28th of this week, the testimony from Fiona Hill and David Holmes. This is Adam Schiff's last closing statement and the last part of his closing statement. Matt, it gets directly to what you were just talking about. Like, should the Republicans be beholden to something beyond their own party aspirations? What other values do we have that we should be conducting our conduct on? Do we have anything else besides personal short-term gain? Or are we actually living in a society that has values and treat other people the way you want to be treated and be honest and be nice and work for the betterment of other people? Let's hear what Schiff has to say. Turn your volume up on this.
What is our duty here? That's what we need to be asking. Not using metaphors about balls and strikes or our team and your team. I've heard my colleagues use those metaphors. This should be about duty. What is our duty? We are, and this gets to Mr. Heck's point, we are the indispensable nation. We still are. People look to us from all over the world. Journalists from their jail cells in Turkey, the victims of mass extrajudicial killing in the Philippines, people who gathered in Tahrir Square wanting a representative government, people people in China who are Uyghurs, People in Ukraine who want a better future, they look to us. They're not going to look to the Russians. They're not going to look to the Chinese. They can't look to Europe with all its problems. They still look to us, and increasingly they don't recognize what they see. Because what they see is Americans saying, don't engage in political prosecutions. And what they say back is, oh, you mean like the Bidens and the Clintons that you want us to investigate? What they see, they don't recognize. And that is a terrible tragedy for us, but it's a greater tragedy for the rest of the world. Now, I happen to think that when the founders provided a mechanism in the Constitution for impeachment, they were worried about what might happen if someone unethical took the highest office in the land and used it for their personal gain and not because of deep care about the big things that should matter, like our national security and our defense and our allies and what the country stands for. I happen to think that's why they put that remedy in the Constitution. And I think we need to consult our conscience and our constituents and decide whether that remedy is appropriate here, whether that remedy is necessary here. And as you know, notwithstanding what my colleague said, I resisted going down this path for a long time, but I will tell you why I could resist no more. And it came down to this. It came down to timing. It came down to the fact that the day after Bob Mueller testified that Donald Trump invited Russian interference, hey, Russia, if you're listening, come get Hillary's emails, and later that day, they tried to hack her server. The day after he testified that not only did Trump invite that interference, but that he welcomed the help in the campaign, they made full use of it, they lied about it, they obstructed the investigation into it, and all this is in his testimony and his report. The day after that, Donald Trump is back on the phone asking another nation to involve itself in another U.S. election. That says to me, this president believes he is above the law, beyond accountability. And in my view, there is nothing more dangerous than an unethical president who believes they are above the law. And I would just say to people watching here at home and around the world, in the words of my great colleague, we are better than that. Adjourned.
And that is the last clip we'll listen to this hour on Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR from Adam Schiff. He is the current Democratic chair of the House Intelligence Committee leading the impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. That was a third of three clips we'll hear from Schiff this hour on his closing statements into the House impeachment inquiry, where over the past 2 weeks we heard from 12 officials, both career-long officials in the U.S. government, serving the government in the State Department, in the White House, in the Defense Department, and also we heard in the inquiry from Trump appointees. From both sides, you heard from people, and that was Adam Schiff saying, should we not be thinking about our duty and things beyond our own personal politics and listening to our conscience when someone wants to use the office of the presidency for his own personal gain, and someone who believes they are above the law, someone who can destroy democracy and people's lives because other people either don't care or are too apathetic or enjoy and want the person to do that because they are on that person's side who wants to abuse power. Very powerful testimony, I think, from Adam Schiff. We did not hear, Matt, from other folks involved in the accusations of the quid pro quo and the withholding of congressionally approved military aid on a bipartisan basis to one of our allies against a defensive war against Russia in exchange for misinformation. We did not hear from people involved in that, including Rudy Giuliani, Trump's personal lawyer, who was leading some of these backdoor negotiations with Ukraine, even though Giuliani is not formally a part of the U.S. government. He's just Trump's personal lawyer. We did not hear from Rick Perry, the energy secretary, who's conveniently resigning at the end of the year. He was also part of the so-called Three Amigos with Gordon Sondland and Rudy Giuliani leading this sidebar diplomacy. We did not hear from Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, the current State Department head, and also conveniently seems to be resigning from his post soon to run for a Senate seat. We did not hear from Mike Pompeo, who knew about this as well and who was supposed to lead the U.S.'s diplomatic relations. We did not hear from John Bolton, who is the National Security Advisor, who is quoted through testimony to say that whatever's going on here in the Trump administration is a cooked-up drug deal. We did not hear from him. We did not hear from Mike Pence, who also was supposed to know about this and who Donald Trump said he should not go to Ukraine to lead these investigations and should instead leave it to Giuliani. We did not hear from William Barr, who in that phone call that the whistleblower informed the government and us about, who Trump wanted William Barr, the head of the Justice Department, which is supposed to be apolitical. We did not hear from William Barr, who Trump said should also, with Giuliani, lead the sidebar diplomacy with Ukraine. And we did not hear from Donald Trump, the man whom all of this circles around and for 3 years and his whole life has had corruption and negativity and mean-spiritedness circle around him. We did not hear from any of them, and Republicans would have you believe, because you didn't hear from those people, none of this matters. You're just hearing from deep state government long career officials. You're just hearing from low-brow appointees of Trump who will probably never Trumpers. None of it matters. And that's where we're at with this impeachment inquiry, is it seems like the needle hasn't moved much further public. I really want to get in another short clip. This is from Mick Mulvaney. So, Matt, you rightfully pointed out the quid pro quo thing, and should we even be talking about that? And it's a fancy word, and there's so many other things that go on, and we should just be very clear on the wrongdoing of the Trump administration. Well, let's go with that quid pro quo thing. And again, that's the whole, I'm withholding aid in return for misinformation. Trump, I'm going to withhold this aid until you give me misinformation. Help me out domestically, politically. So this is from Mick Mulvaney. He is the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. He's also the acting Chief of Staff for the White House since January. He came out in, oh boy, I wrote this down somewhere. When was this clip? He came out on October 17th of this year when, before, as the steam was increasing for the impeachment inquiry, and he basically admitted to it. Mick Mulvaney, one of Trump's, I should have included him on the list of people who we haven't heard from either, because he's directly involved with this as well. He was the one who withheld that aid to Ukraine. Let's hear what Mick Mulvaney had to say to a reporter who's asking Mick Mulvaney, was this a quid pro quo? Let's hear for 2 minutes what Mick Mulvaney had to say.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happened as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy. We were holding up money at the same time for the Northern Triangle countries. We were holding up aid at the Northern Triangle countries so that they would change their policies on immigration. By the way, and this speaks to an important. I'm sorry. This speaks to an important point, because I heard this yesterday, and I can never remember the gentleman who testified. Was it McKinney? The guy, is that his name? I don't know him. He testified yesterday. And if you believe the news reports, okay, because we've not seen any transcripts of this. The only transcript I've seen was Sondland's testimony this morning. If you read the news reports and you believe them, what did McKinney say yesterday? Well, McKinney said yesterday that he was really upset with the political influence in foreign policy. That was one of the reasons he was so upset about this. And I have news for everybody. Get over it. there's going to be political influence in foreign policy. I'm talking to Mr. Carl. That is going to happen. Elections have consequences, and foreign policy is going to change from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. And what you're seeing now, I believe, is a group of mostly career bureaucrats who are saying, you know what, I don't like President Trump's politics, so I'm going to participate in this witch hunt that they're undertaking on the Hill. Elections do have consequences, and they should, and your foreign policy is going to change. Obama did it in one way, we're doing it a different way, and there's no problem with that.
That was Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House Chief of Staff and Office of Management and Budget Director. October 17th, he came out and said, get over it, okay.
Hasn't given a lot of press conferences since then.
Yeah. I don't like playing clips from people from the Trump administration because it's so spurious and false. Like it's simply, it's not true. And it's false to say that it's normal for diplomacy to happen in a way where it's like, hey, we're not going to do this thing for you, foreign government, unless you help me in a domestic election. That's not true.
This has been one of their strategies since day one, is to twist the narrative in such a way to make it feel as though this is something that always happens, in order to inoculate people towards the idea of what they're actually doing, which is fundamentally altering the way in which this country operates.
Yeah. We have a caller here on 100.9 FM WXIR. You are on the air. Hello.
Hi, how's it going, everybody? Aaron from Queens here.
Aaron from Queens. Good to hear from you. We are running a bit out of time, so we'd love to hear from you, but you got to keep it tight.
For sure, I'll try. Yeah, so I just wanted to call in because I think Mick Mulvaney, I don't think what he said should be so easily dismissed. I think, so I called in to defend not the spirit of his remarks, but the content of them. I think he's accurate in the sense that that U.S. foreign policy, foreign aid, basically the U.S., it's true that the U.S. has been, for 100 years now, basically since the U.S. became a global superpower, the U.S., it's true that we have acted in other countries and meddled in their internal affairs and pressured governments and installed coups and dictators and, invaded other countries for our own benefit. And I guess the difference here is, of course, that the shocking thing is that, this is not for U.S. global hegemony. It's just for one person's personal pursuits, one person's personal interests, in this case, Donald Trump. So, I get why that's sort of unconscionable to the, to the neoliberal established order that's in D.C., people that Adam Schiff and centrist Democrats who, are just so outraged and shocked by Trump's behavior day in, day out. That's what bothers them the most, is that, it's not in pursuit of American supremacy, American, global power. It's more just in pursuit of this, one, very, very ethically compromised, demented old man's, personal interests. So I don't think the fundamental basis has really changed under which the U.S. Interferes or pressures foreign governments to do things for them. It's just who is benefiting from that, instead of say, the neoliberal established order, like I said, instead it's just this one person. So I think that's what Mick is getting onto, but I agree that the spirit of his remarks are, really unconscionable.
Aaron,
thank you.
Thank you for calling in. We always appreciate it. As always, we are going to have to end our conversation there because we're running out of time. I would agree with you, Aaron. I've told this to you before, Matt, I think off the air, but perhaps on as well. It's so sad that we're in the Trump administration now is because we can't have legitimate conversations on larger things that we should be critical about of the U.S. government. For instance, the U.S. government's support of democratic elections across the world, right? So I totally get your point, Aaron, and it's too bad we can't even have those discussions because the bar has been lowered so much thanks to the Trump administration for the past several years. But I hear what you're saying. I want to end on 20 seconds here of the Republicans' arguments. First, their defense of Trump was that it was a perfect phone call, whatever the heck that means. It was a perfect call. That's all they started with, perfect call. And then it was a hearsay. So, you're not actually hearing Donald Trump say it. And then you have, okay, there are people who heard Donald Trump say it, but there's no definitive proof. You can't really prove that, there was a quid pro quo directly between Trump and Zelensky, which doesn't matter because, again, we said that even if you have the intent to withhold the aid, it's still the fault, right? Just because the burglars were caught doesn't mean that there's no crime. And then, lastly, what we're in now is that the defense of the Republicans is that the president can do whatever he wants. Of course, we have Trump's lawyer who says that, Trump literally could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he can't be charged as a sitting president. We should end the conversation right there. That's obscene. And I agree with Schiff and Elijah Cummings. We are better than that. So we should end the show. Thank you very much for tuning in to Evidence of Design on 100.9 FM WXIR. Stay tuned and stay informed. You can catch our past shows on YouTube by searching for the Evidence of Design YouTube channel. We're back live on Saturdays from 11 to 12. Up next is the Esquire Hour. They put on a killer show. I was Jason Taylor, your host, joined by my good friend and co-host, Matt Treadwell.
That's me.
Matt will be back next week. Until then, be well, be safe, and bye-bye.